So the four mind turnings, or the four mind turning reflections, are they're a set of teachings which was particularly drawn out by a particular teacher called Gampopa, and he was a Tibetan teacher. And they're called the mind turning reflections because they're designed to illuminate what's going to motivate us to practice the Dharma. And it's interesting because, so in some ways they're sort of preparatory, that they're designed to sort of, help us want to practice. So they're motivational, but they also contain within them the actual teaching. So it's not just that they turn our minds to be taught. They do that, but they also contain within them Buddhist teachings in and of themselves, if that makes sense. So our own teacher said there are no higher teachings, there are deeper understandings. So what you'll find here laid out are ways into what Buddhism says about wisdom, what Buddhism says about the mind. It's all there in these preparatory reflections. Yeah. So the importance of these reflections, or how they work really, is that if we see things clearly, then they become not just an abstract idea, which then becomes something that we should do, or that sort of only our sort of intellect is motivated. But if we see things clearly, it engages our emotions, and we'll sort of automatically then respond, if that makes sense. So, like for example, if someone, so you might have the idea of like, oh, I should give money to charity, I should try and help, and you sort of not sure which one, don't get around to it. But if you see something, like if you witness suffering or see something deeply inspiring, the automatic next thing is to say, how can I help change this, or how can I support this to keep growing? Yeah. So rather than having this idea I should be helping, it's like, oh, of course, it opens the heart, and you want to help. So these reflections, they work a bit like that. Like once you see these things more clearly, then you'll necessarily act. And what we know about Buddhism already can easily become blurry and sort of be sort of put into the background. It's a bit like when I was thinking about when I put my specs on. I only wear them to train stations because I can't read the signs. And generally day to day I don't really notice, like a blurry leaf looks sort of roughly similar to a leaf on a tree. I can see enough of what's happening. But when I put my glasses on at a train station, I can actually, it's not that I can see, but I can read and understand. So this is what these reflections do. Is they delineate, and then so that we can understand something that's probably vague and a bit misty, clarifies, and then we can read it properly, so to speak, and understand. So the reflections are that human life is precious. It's a precious opportunity. So it's precious in and of itself, because we're given all of these. We're given so much, all of these faculties, all of these experiences and ways of experiencing, and it's precious because it affords us to practice the Dharma. So it affords us to be able to practice Buddhism, to grow our minds, to grow our hearts. Human life is precious for those reasons. And then another reflection is that things are impermanent. So there's this preciousness and there's this fleetingness. The quality, like things do not stay around. They change. They change slowly. They change fast, but they nevertheless change. And it's important that we pay attention to that. And then the third reflection is the truth of karma. So really, this is saying that within the whole range of different experiences that we have the where we can act effectively, where we can act most effectively, is taking responsibility for our mind, and that's possible. And the fact that if we do that, the more we take responsibility, ethical responsibility, turn our minds towards the connectedness of ourselves and others, the more our minds will be sort of conditioned to do that more and more. Yeah. So those are the three reflections that we've had so far: preciousness of human life, impermanence, the fleetingness, and the truth of karma. And then this evening we're going to be exploring what's called the defects of samsara, so the faults of conditioned existence, or even the faults of worldly existence. What are we choosing to ignore about our experience that we could pay more attention to, and why is that helpful? That's what we'll be exploring this evening. And within that, we'll get to grips with some definitions, like what do Buddhists mean by samsara, for example. Well, I'm just going to introduce us to the theme of the evening a bit more in depth. So, yes, the defects or faults of conditioned existence. So this is an encouragement by the Buddha to notice what's wrong with our current situation. And I think it draws attention to the fact that we very often don't want to. I'm going to start with defining the word samsara, which is what was often used for a description of conditioned existence. So samsara, the word, the roots of the word are to do with the cyclical nature of things and repetition. It's also described as wandering, so revolving, cyclical, perpetual repetition, as a description of mundane worldly existence. So this, when the Buddha became enlightened, he had quite a few very, very interesting and quite distinctive visionary experiences during that sort of, it wasn't just a kind of click of the fingers and he was unenlightened and then enlightened. Well, there's probably something in that, but there are lovely descriptions of what he realised and different ways of articulating it. And the thing that he saw was just lifetimes and lifetimes of people feeling the consequences of their action. So a sort of onslaught of many existences being driven by the kind of tendencies of mind that they had. So in this, when we're imagining this, we have to go through. We have to take on the belief of rebirth, just to imagine ourselves properly into what the Buddha saw, and bad rebirths, lots of suffering, glorious rebirths with like high status and wealth and comfort, and this sort of happening over and over again, and it's described in the Tibetan Wheel of Life, if you know that symbol. So it's a description of something that we can get stuck in. And if you want a smaller version, a sort of more personal version of that, is that you can reflect on when you get to sort of a certain level of adulthood, you suddenly think, oh, hang on a minute, I'm doing this again. So we have our own patterns, our own sort of perpetual or cyclical mental patterns or scenarios that we find ourselves involved in. And sometimes because the costumes are different, we don't sort of notice that we're bringing the same habits to those scenarios. Does that make sense? And have you ever just sort of kind of like had that sort of oh my goodness, this is so familiar, and I'm the main I seem to be the main person involved in this. So samsara is this quality of experience that Buddhism says that we can transcend. And samsara, it's not saying, so we're reflecting on the faults of conditioned existence, but Buddhism doesn't say that nothing is good. So there's the Buddha often gets sort of paraphrased of saying life is suffering, which is a very, very unsubtle way of describing what the Buddha pointed out that was wrong about conditioned existence. There are lots of pleasures, but they're not the kinds of pleasures that satisfy us. So we go about pursuing pleasure and ignoring pain, if we can, and we can view this. It's basic, isn't it? Life is a mixture of pleasure and pain, and we can view this in different ways. So you might be really strongly orientated to one way of seeing life or the other. So you might get someone who just mainly thinks life is bad, yeah. And I've definitely been in those moods. If it's not my general tendency, but you might get some people like life is just difficult. It's just a series of difficulties, and for some people, life has been like that, but it's usually temperamental rather than true. And you might get some people saying, "What are you worrying about? Life is good. Just relax. Stop taking things so seriously. Life is good." So you might get those viewpoints on what existence is like, and you might see both. You might see pleasure and pain, light and dark, however you want to view it, and you might just think, well, life is a mixture of both. And usually it's not as articulated as that. We don't normally plan our lives like that, but we sort of orientate ourselves. Like, life is a mixture of both. I'm mainly just going to try and arrange my life so that I push away pain and have as much pleasure as possible. And pleasures come in all sorts of guises as well. And you might have that same view. Life is a mixture of pleasure and pain. You try to aim for the pleasure, but you might add on, and this means living a good life, because you've noticed that helping others live well, connection, friendship, society, being a good citizen, for example, that actually feels better, is actually more pleasurable than a kind of selfish orientation. So there's that. There's lots of different worldviews in this basic data that life is a mixture of pleasure and pain. Yeah. You might have your own version. It's probably quite interesting, isn't it, to reflect on that, like how do I view life and suffering and pleasure. I think one of the pervasive views or ideas of the world is like, there are hacks to life, and if you get it right, you can optimize, and you'll be beautiful, you'll be buff, you'll be rich. I don't know what else. You will have a nice house. All of that can come if you I don't know, read the right self-help book. Yeah. So that you there's some grain of truth in that. Well, the kind of husk of truth in that is that we can take some responsibility about how we review our suffering or not suffering, but it ignores the fact that there's so much in our experience that we can't control. Even ourselves, it's not like that we can't control externals and we can control everything about ourselves. We can't even control everything about ourselves. We can just take responsibility. Yeah, does that make sense? As slightly different things. Yeah. So the religious viewpoint will be that in this world that's a mixture of pleasure and pain, there is that there needs to be a new perspective, and that perspective is that there's something in these two dualities, really, that there's something to transcend, and different religions respond differently to that, but that's what's in common. That's how I would define a religion, is that it looks at suffering and says it can't be resolved on the level of arranging your life in one way or another. There's has to be a broader perspective, and most religions have God or many gods that bring that transcendence, and in Buddhism that's taken out of the equation, but that's what we're trying to look for. So it's not just that hey guys, there's bad news, life there's this perpetual cycle of patterns that you can't get out of. Buddhism says there is a way out. There is a spiritual way out, a transcendent way out, and let's look at that as well. But we have to be motivated enough to want our way out. So this is what reflecting on the faults of samsara are, if that makes sense. So a metaphor of our attitude might be something like, there's a beautiful ocean, maybe you can go snorkeling, and there's all this beauty, so that and you're enjoying the colours, the fish and stuff like that, and it's quite warm. You forget that the sea is actually dangerous, and you only look at the beauty. You forget that the ocean can have tidal waves, can have storms, and that it's not we can't breathe in the sea, that we actually will drown. So we only look at once. It's a one side. So we're very one-sided very often, yeah. And the reflection on samsara and the faults of samsara says, let's look at the whole picture and let's clarify, let's get a much better perspective about what's going on, and that means like what's actually rewarding, what's actually giving us pleasure, rather than what's our idea of what pleasure is. I mean, partly there's a kind of just a sort of non-transcendental maturity that as we get older, when you, maybe this was just me, when I was a sort of a teenager in 20s, like I had all ideas about what was actually giving me pleasure, but I didn't bother to notice that I didn't actually like doing a lot of the things I thought I should be doing. So there's just that sort of natural, at some point one goes, do you know what, I just don't really like doing what everyone else is doing, I'm going to do my own thing. So there's that. But there's much deeper, subtler reflections about what we ask of reality. So this is what the faults of samsara are, is that we're asking our experience to satisfy us, and it's got this, we've already reflected on the fact that it's fleeting. So for example, we're asking for an ultimate bit of satisfaction from something that can't be grasped, that can't survive. Yeah. So we get disappointed, and Buddhism says, well, that's interesting, isn't it? Like we wanted something from something, and you didn't get it. Rather than think, okay, that's the wrong thing, I want another thing. So rather than maybe it's like, oh, I really wanted to be loved, and then that didn't, I don't know, a relationship ended. It's like, okay, maybe status, maybe respect and recognition, that's more attractive. Maybe that's what I want. Or maybe my nephew seems to be drawn to like cool cars, so maybe that he won't be watching, I don't think. So maybe his new like black Range Rover with like really high wheel, or what do you call it anyway, that space? Anyway, when they lift it up, and it's actually like got snorkel bits, so you can drive underwater. Oh yeah. It's a thing. Anyway, maybe that's the thing that's going to give him really ultimate satisfaction, because everyone's going to be really impressed, and or maybe not. But so one keeps. You can drop the thing and move on to the next thing, or you can reflect. And it's just okay, I noticed that I was really invested in something giving me satisfaction, and either I didn't get that thing, and what's that like? Disappointment, like not getting onto the MA that you have applied for, or not getting the job that you wanted, or the lover that you wanted. What's that like, to not get that? And Buddhism says that that's interesting. Disappointments are interesting. Why do we rely on something that we can't, that's not reliable? Like that there's potency in that reflection. I feel like I was going to offer something else then. Yeah. Or maybe we do get the thing, that's it. Maybe it's like, oh yeah, I got the dream job, and maybe it's actually quite good, like, and you feel competent and like you're doing good in the world or something, but still there's something that's not fully satisfying. So what the Dharma says, what Buddhism says, is that even though things can be really good, you can notice that nothing will fulfill us completely. And it's even said that even in the most deep meditation experiences, where there's an enormous amount of pleasure, that if you look for it, there'll be something that's saying this isn't, that there's more. And actually that's what the Buddha noticed, that before he became enlightened, he was an excellent meditator, and he'd learnt all the practices, and was able to access a lot of bliss and very, very profound states of consciousness. But somehow, even though he didn't have he didn't have a Buddha to follow like we do, but somehow he knew that there was more. He was able to notice that there was a shadow of something more, that these meditative states, fulfilling as they were, didn't offer, weren't the completion. Yeah. So that's what we're going to be exploring. Let's have a break now and have some tea, and then come back and we can talk about it. I was just in the tea break. I was just thinking about the things, the amount of times I've over-invested in something, and sometimes it's really small, like a meal, like, oh yeah, I can't wait to have like all these nice things, and even if it is really good, it's over, isn't it? And then you've eaten a little bit too much and have to deal with that. But then the other things, it's just very interesting. I was just thinking, like, times when I've got really crestfallen, really disappointed, and now I'm fine. That's all those heartbreaks when I was younger, all of the things that I thought. I got a job that I really wanted once, and it was good, but it wasn't. Like, I don't know. It's like it didn't actually change my life. So what I thought would be helpful is if we could get into maybe groups of 3 and just say, have you ever expected something from something that it can't give you? Yeah. Have you ever expected something from something or someone or a situation that it can't give you, and what it couldn't give you, and what was that like? Good. So hopefully you all had a chance to say something, or at least bring something to mind. So you've shared when a time that you've been disappointed in something, and the question that I'd like to ask you now is, like, did anybody learn anything from that experience, and what did you learn, or what happened? Yeah, Danny.
Don't expect what you can get from that experience or certain thing.
Yeah. So do you feel like that has been a lesson that you have actually learned, or do you think you're going to keep doing it?
Yeah, keep doing that. the example I gave them was just that I used to go to a lot of DJ gigs and stuff, and I'll be there for hours. I'm just like, why hasn't a DJ played something I know, or some famous tune? I just feel like, oh my god, this hour's wasted. It's late at night. I just wanted to go to bed now if he's not gonna play any new song. And now I do less of those gigs, but I think one thing I learned is just to don't expect, what people are gonna play at the
Yeah.
gig.
Like, I guess if you're going to do stuff like that, you just have to be open to
Yes, exactly.
what's happening, or not do it and play it yourself at home. Yeah. Okay, good. Anyone else got any?
I think I'm going to counter that a little bit, because I think it's natural to expect things, and I don't think you can not expect. So that's kind of an expectation of yourself in itself. So I think it's maybe being aware of the fact that you might be expecting and trying to work with that. But I think that is part of being human being, is to have expectations.
And is there an example when have you felt disappointed, and has that been interesting? I guess that's what the question is. Like, what have you learned?
What have I learned from being disappointed? Well, that is kind of what I feel.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I was countering it, because that's an observation that I have made.
Yeah.
Is that I feel like that is part of it, like, that you do expect, because you kick yourself for going, oh, I had an expectation. And then it's like, that's actually just making it kind of worse, and you're putting yourself under pressure to be something that you're not, because it is natural to have expectations. And I think it's just about, I guess for me, the learning is like owning it and being okay with being disappointed as well. I think there's a part of that. It's like allow yourself to feel disappointment too.
Yeah.
You don't have to always avoid it completely, I think, because there's a lesson in that as well. So maybe it's more like trying to be less hard on yourself.
Or I mean, another thing that can happen when our expectations aren't met is that we're hard on other people. Like, it's something like, I think that's really I think that's a good point to a good lesson to learn, is just to stay with the disappointment rather than look for the source of look for blame, because that's one of the things that can unfold from
True.
That, so self-blame or someone else. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyone else? Was it interesting, sort of bringing it to mind, this experience of disappointment? Yeah. Has anyone sort of got an experience where they I mean, maybe I'll share an experience. Sort of often happens to me. I was thinking it's a bit of a funny situation. One of the times I felt really, really despondent. So I went to art school and studied drawing and painting, and then my friend and I were looking for a studio, and we viewed this studio in a church in central London, in the church tower, and it's a special church. It's called St Mary Walneth. It's quite near Bank Statement. If you're into church architecture, you'll know about it. Anyway, and to me, I was like I'm not so much like this anymore, but like the romance of having a painting studio in central London in a church tower, I was like, we have got to have this. We have got to take it. It was amazing. It was like the bell pulls were coming up, and like this view over I can't remember which street it's on anyway. And this was quite a long time ago. I don't know why it came to mind. I just remember. I think it was the total unreality of my idea of. And so my friend and I went to view it, and this guy, he had been using it as a painting studio, and he was moving on. And I was like, okay, yeah, shall we get it? And she was like, my friend was like, yeah, but none of the windows have got glass in it. and I was like, oh my God, that's such a small consideration. And then like slowly I realised that we actually, like I couldn't use that space. But what I pinned onto it like was like this whole kind of romantic idea, and projected myself into the future. And not only was it, I'm going like having a space in that church tower was going to make me special, but it was also going to make me have loads of magical times and be a really, really great artist. Like all of that was loaded into this. And then my friend was like appallingly realistic about the fact. I mean, we're both, not that tough, really. But it was like that, like the rug had really been pulled out of under my feet. I'm sure I cried. Anyway. Yeah, it's just interesting, like what we so I think it's, no one's saying don't have expectations, and no one's saying don't move towards things or have aspirations. I think what Buddhism is pointing out is that we load onto samsara, this unreliable experience. We load onto it our whole worth and happiness, and it can't give us that. It can't give us that. I'm gonna move on to the next point, actually. So samsara is often talked about as we're in samsara, so it becomes a place, like the world, and sometimes we end up talking about like, we come off retreat in lovely conditions, and then we come back to London and it's like, oh, we're back in samsara, as if it's a place. And samsara is, well, what's the opposite? Does anyone know what the opposite in Buddhism, what the opposite of samsara is? It's a word with the same amount of syllables, it almost rhymes. Not samadhi, yeah. Nirvana, yeah. So nirvana is one of the ways that the Buddha described his awakening, and nirvana means, so samsara is this like perpetuality and this cyclical experience, and nirvana means extinguishing, as if it means bringing the end to something, which can sound a bit bleak. It's not particularly appealing unless we have the perspective of like this torrent of habitual patterned behaviour, and I don't know if that's ever happened to you, and it's like, this has got to stop, like I've got to stop doing it, something like that. So nirvana means the end, it means merely the end of samsara. It means the awakening from being involved and over-invested or invested at all in samsara, delivering happiness. So nirvana is the way out. And again, the word nirvana can often be used like either as a state. So the Buddha, we're often a place. It's like the Buddha reached nirvana or attained to nirvana. So both of those ways. I mean, it's just a convenient way of speaking. We can't caveat every single thing when we're trying to describe Buddhism. But actually, the word nirvana was used first, more like a verb. So our teacher Bhante said, Sangharakshita says, with the word nirvana, which another translation of it is enlightenment, which again is like a state, isn't it? But he says it's better to think that one goes on enlightening and enlightening. It's a process or a function, not an object that you acquire or a possession that you grasp or a place that you go. Yeah. So he says one way you could think about it is that a Buddha nirvana-rizes. It's constantly recreating itself. The experience of enlightenment is constantly recreating itself, but that recreation of itself is wholly positive and untainted, Whereas we can think of samsara in the same way. So we samsara-rise, which is, he says, samsara is action utterly devoid of wisdom. Yeah? Action utterly devoid of wisdom. So it is how we act, it's the lens we perceive through. So that throws it back onto our own minds, and we can even just like now, or like coming out of the class or on the way home, you think, am I going to nirvana-rise, i.e. move towards a more creative mental state, or am I going to samsara-rise and create more difficulty? Does that make sense? So what that offers us is less of a sort of attainment mentality in terms of our spiritual life, and it says we can start creating a more positive experience of our minds now. Yeah, but we're so that I think that's important in terms of how we view conditioned existence, is that actually it's our minds that are conditioned. It's whether we are operating in the mode of grasping and pushing away, complaining, blaming, or are we in the mode of generosity, connectedness, what are other positive words? Clarity, seeing things more clearly. So we can samsara-rise or we can nirvana-rise. And one of the ways that we can nirvana-rise, I've only ever read that word, it's a bit of a made up word, but is just to bring clarity to our experience and reflect on and not over invest in our experience. So the way that we get completely involved in samsara is it's almost like we're only looking down and we're only doing the next thing, and we never look up and go, okay, is there another way of doing this? Is there something broader and bigger that I can bring to my life? Is what I'm doing offering the most, making the most use of this precious human life? That's one of the other reflections. One of the things that over-relying on samsara does is it limits our energy. So we spend a lot of time grasping at things that are just like trying to hold on to sand, and it's slipping through our fingers, and that wastes energy. If we can start to remove that overinvestment, and again reminding it doesn't mean that we don't try for things, then more and more energy becomes available for the pursuit of our spiritual life, in fact. There's a little quote by our teacher, actually, and he said that he no longer expected anything from samsara. So he no longer had any expectation that things would go his way, or he had no... That sounds almost defeatist, but the fact is what he means is that he had no reliance on things going his way. His spiritual practice was such that he could rely completely on that, and he didn't need what that frees one from is that he didn't need people to affirm him, or he wasn't looking for anything from anybody else. What else? He wasn't blaming anyone for any difficulties that he might experience. He wasn't expecting something from his body that his body didn't deliver. Sometimes it's a surprise to us if our bodies start not feeling immortal, and a shock. And when I reflect on that statement, I find it quite profound, actually. I mean, quite amazing to not have that expectation or sort of hope, even that not to need that, because I think I go around day to day just sort of hoping things are going to go okay for me, and trying to make that happen. And without that, and if you're attain to enough spiritual depth, what one has is a lot of freedom. One's free from needing, imagine that, free from needing things to go your way, free from needing even things to not be painful, free from needing people to reflect you back, approve of you, all of these things. Where have I got to? And one of the things he also says, and this is a separate point, when he was younger and he was first setting up our Buddhist movement, people looked up to him so much, and he'd like have some people around to dinner and they'd be so awkward, and sort of like, imagine the conversation just really didn't go anywhere because they're like, and so he'd send out for someone to get a bottle of wine, which is not something we do particularly in our Buddhist communities now, but needs must. And so he said, someone asked him, well, like, what did he think of drinking alcohol, which he really didn't do it very, very much, but it would help relax everyone around the dinner table, and you could actually have a conversation. And someone asked him what he thought of it, and he said, well, I suppose one has a tendency, when you have a glass of wine, one can overlook the faults of samsara a little bit more. But that was it. But that's interesting too, because like, what do we do to protect ourselves from seeing the faults of samsara? And obviously alcohol and intoxicants are excellent examples. Like we just use them to orientate ourselves to pleasure, and numb ourselves to discomfort, emotional discomfort, existential discomfort, anguish, the sense of disorientation. So Buddhism, what it's saying is there is this suffering of being in the world, but it's not. It doesn't leave us with that. Thank goodness. It says there is a way out, and we can work on our minds. We can see more deeply into where we cause ourselves suffering, and that's in the end. That's creating an ego identity that we keep perpetuating. That's what samsara is a sense of a me that needs certain things in order to maintain it. That we can free ourselves. We can free ourselves from that. But we have to. We're not going to do that if we don't take it seriously. If we think that samsara is actually going to be kind of okay, and in the end, all averages out good enough or something, or that if we ignore our own faults, the faults of others, the difficult communications, the disappointments, or if we carry on blaming. Blame is a way of saying that things shouldn't happen this way. Like something goes wrong, someone should do something about it, or I should have done something about it. So nirvana is completely free of blame, even if one is treated badly. We take responsibility for that pain, completely. Okay, so, and maybe I just sort of thought I'd give a couple of examples of some of the disciples of the Buddha who moved away from expecting things from a worldly life. And it's very interesting, the differences. So one of them was a woman called Kisa Gotami. Some of you might have heard of her. But she lost a child, and in her family she was very low status as well, in her in-laws' household. So she lost her child, and she lost any hope of being treated well within that family. And she lost her son, her baby son. And so she was crazed with sadness, as you would be, like heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. She had this one thing in her life, precious thing, and she couldn't keep it. She couldn't keep her son. And she met the Buddha, and he taught her, I won't go to the whole story, but he gave her a sort of experiential teaching where she realised that her suffering wasn't personal, that it could happen to anyone, and other people suffered too. So we take suffering really personally, don't we? So that's one. And through that experience, she said to the Buddha, she went for refuge to the Buddha. So she said, I would like to follow your path, and she came out of her terrible grief and came to some sense of joy and equanimity. So that's Kisa Gotami. There was another guy called Yasa. He was one of the earliest disciples. It's a completely different story. He's a kind of princely kind of character, lots of money, not very much responsibility. So he was just partying the whole time. And he woke up, or didn't go to sleep, sort of after this debauched occasion, and he looked around, and there were people everywhere, dribbling, drunken stupor, half naked. I don't know if you've ever been at a party or sort of come out of the language of a party and looked at it like properly. Anyway, he kind of was like looking around and going, oh my goodness, what this is like. I thought this was fun, and it's really not. And he ran out. He had golden shoes. He ran out in his golden shoes, going, this is horrible, it's terrible, it's horrible, right, deep into the forest, where he encountered the Buddha. And the Buddha was like, okay, that was horrible and terrible. This is not horrible, is it? And sat with the Buddha and his disciples and started meditating, and realised, became one of the Buddha's, I think it was his 6th disciple. Then all of the playboys and party people, they all became the Buddha's disciples too. So it was all good. Apparently. So that one. And then there's Dania. This is the final one that I'll share. And this is interesting too, because this is a kind of, I think this is where I would get trapped. So Dania, he's got a little homestead, or like a small holding, and it's about to be the rainy season, and the harvest is in. The cows are in the shed. He's got a really nice wife and family. The house is all leak-proof. The roof's mended. You know, the sense of like worldly satisfaction of a job well done. His life's in order, and he's sitting there going, so if you rain gods, please rain. If you want to rain, please rain, because he knows he's done everything he can do. So he's feeling smug, I guess, or pleased with himself. He's happy. And then the Buddha just sort of comes and creeps along, and there's this exchange between them where the Buddha is just saying, everything that Dania talks about, the cattle, the wife, the crops, the grains in the store, the Buddha sort of slowly undermining it, saying, that's great, but I don't need any of that. I don't need a house. I don't need a wife. I don't need to rely on that. It's much more beautifully put than how I'm describing it. So in that story, Dania, it sort of works on the Buddha, on him, what the Buddha's saying. In that story, Dania doesn't have a moment of disillusionment in a way. It's just that the Buddha says, you've got this, but there's so much more. And the Buddha often does that. He says, well, yes, there is beauty or satisfaction or but if you only knew it, there's so much more. And that's one of the ways that we can experience suffering actually as well. It's not that we're actually suffering, but there's just this sense that maybe there could be more, that life offers more if we could just find our way to it. Yeah. Okay. So what I actually thought is that we could end with a little meditation, and in it, it's just really simple. I want you to just look for both pleasure and pain in your experience without trying to change it. Just recognizing both of those things. So when we become more aware, we practice mindfulness, we can expand the ability of our attention to include more and more joy, and also not turn away from what's difficult in our experience. And by doing that, we're strengthening our ability to really, really look hard at samsara. Gampopa says of samsarizing, ordinary people are insensitive to the suffering of conditioned existence, whereas realized beings are greatly distressed by it. There's a famous Buddhist image, and there's a whole story around it, of a burning house and a man whose children are in the house, and they're so caught up with their toys that they don't even notice that the house is on fire. And the man's thinking, what am I to do? He's tried shouting, get out, get out. And he knows the only thing that will actually work is to entice them out by more. He buys them loads of like cool toys and has them on the outside of the house. Exactly. So that's what the Buddhists, in a way, from the enlightened point of view, is that like samsara, the world is on fire, and the Buddha said it's burning with greed and hatred and delusion, but you just don't notice it. And for some people, that's enough motivation that there's just to look at samsara in that way, and to just want none of it, just to pull away. For others, we need more enticement. We want to know what's beautiful about what we're moving towards. And I was just thinking, that there's, when we stop using samsara, when we stop using the world to appropriate our own, for our own appropriation, including people, then we see things really as they are. So if I don't need anything from you guys, if you don't need anything from anyone around you, there's no need for any defense. You can just see things exquisitely and uniquely as they are. So that's what the Buddha would have done. If you met the Buddha, he would have just not been afraid, not been concerned. He would have just been able to take you in more than you could ever take yourself in, more than anyone else had ever been able to do before. And that's what it's like to be enlightened. Things become beautiful. They become sort of, you see them glowing for their own sake, rather than for what you might need them for, or for utilitarian purposes. All of that vanishes, and the world becomes like a living symbol in a way, like filled with beauty. So that's, if you want, you can look at the burning house and you can look what's wrong with it, but you also need to know you can leave it, and there's beauty to be found.